paradox warfare that's truly fun and rewarding, an unprecedentedly epic map of the ancient world, and deep government and diplomatic systems. Imperator Rome is one of those games I still think about years later, because it's actually one of the most tragic stories in Paradox history. And it's not a story the Carthaginians would tell you. CK2, EU4, Hearts of Iron 4, and Stellaris? Long ago, the 4 Paradox games lived in harmony, each one more beloved than the next. Paradox looked upon their creation and smiled, for they saw that it was good, and their players were happy. In their hubris, a god of the Paradoxians elected to forge another realm, one vaster than any that came before it. The people were excited, and there was much rejoicing. But when the day of creation came, it was revealed that this new game was unfinished. It had bones to be sure, but they were weak, hollowed from the inside. And when the world needed the combined efforts of the Paradoxian gods the most, they vanished. 2 years passed, and the game's 2.0 update made Imperator the game it always should have been, at least on a fundamental level. But then, the gods left Imperator to its own devices, seeing that not enough people spent time with it. And that, as they say, is that. For now anyway. It's a true story too. Imperator Rome is one of the saddest stories in Paradox and Grand Strategy gaming history, specifically because of how awesome the game is right now, but also because of its unrealized potential. I mean, look at it. This is a game that takes place in antiquity, one of the earliest starting dates we have in Grand Strategy gaming. It depicts the advent of Rome as a power player in Italy and the Diadochi successor states in the Near East and their titanic power struggle. It concerns the barbarian tribes all over Europe, North Africa, and Asia, the great Carthaginian Empire, or even the massive Mauryan Empire in India. It features the largest and most detailed Paradox Grand Campaign map ever made up to that point, but surely remains in the top 2 even today. This is in the grand scheme of things just the backdrop of why Imperator is so cool, and it gets so much better. In fact, Imperator had awesome music, beautiful visuals, now a perfect UI, and it really tried to blend EU4 with CK2, having important state mechanics but also characters, which when I think about it, didn't work that well at launch. It is, however, this design that, while definitely giving Imperator a less focused and sometimes more ambiguous feeling, that cements it as an empire builder that really tried something new. Because considering that Imperator only had 2 years of post-launch content, and remember, very little of it paid, and content that in many ways first and foremost went into literally remaking the entire game's UI and core systems to function as intended, there's an extreme amount of content and game to enjoy here, and I want to talk about some of the most fun ones first. And this might sound crazy to many of you Paradox players, since we are after all fans of Grand Strategy here, but I do need to give a big shout out to Imperator's warfare system, and this is why. Imperator leads you through several hundred years of rapidly changing military reforms, and it's portrayed through one of the most radical warfare systems in Paradox history. We begin with a simple system of levies. Levies are conscripts, non-professional soldiers that are mustered during wartime, and each levy army belongs to a region, meaning they are also tied to the governor of said region, and as such, the governor becomes the general of the regional army in the event of war. A levy is based on your integrated population and capabilities in the chosen region, meaning a levy will look different based on where it's raised. Levies are unprofessional and rather unreliable though, and is therefore mostly a thing of the early game in non-major powers. You'll see, for example, that Egypt begins with legions. And so, when you have progressed enough with a faction like Rome, you'll be able to change your martial law, meaning you can finally establish professional standing armies, with generals that command them at any point, and this is when the true warfare system gets going. Much like levies, legions are tied to a region, but only in the sense that it's founded there, and that the size of the legion and its population determines its maximum size. However, you get to choose the composition of the legion as you see fit, and as long as your treasury can handle it. Of course, the massive benefit is that relying on a legion mostly only drains your purse, while even though raising a levy is technically cheaper, it drains your empire of other valuable aspects like base tax, research points, and local manpower. A legion can even be divided into several armies depending on your needs. They have their very own histories, and they can even gain unique distinctions and traditions inherent to that legion, making for highly personalized and memorable armies. Furthermore, armies can build roads as to connect your empire, they can construct border forts, and since Imperator is an actually great game, you actually get to ferry your armies across the seas with a physical navy. They won't just transport across the ocean without ships, and I love that realism, as it also means you have to maintain a powerful navy to win overseas wars. The generals also have a lot to say, of course, with their military skills being among the most important factors, but do beware of a disloyal general, since the more battles you win and the more actions you take with them, there is a chance that individual legionaries will become personally loyal to that general, meaning that the chance of civil wars increase depending on your internal stability. And lastly but not least, we have the national military traditions. Each nation has access to 2 different systems of traditions, focusing on different aspects of military and state. For Rome, we may choose between the Roman and the Italic tribe traditions, with the former being the more historic imperialist route, while the latter gives a more ahistoric but local flavor to the military. These traditions are then opened up further by spending the military experience currency, which is gained through wars and training, and will seriously enhance your armies as time goes by, meaning that the more wars you wage, the more powerful your armies will inherently become. A system that really puts emphasis on experience and power through action, and I love that. There are many more intricacies and nuance to warfare than what I've laid out here, but this gives you an overview over the depth and love that's been put into Imperator's military systems, and I love how everything turned out in the end, which by the way, is just so much better than what the original release version offered. Turning away from warfare now, and as with most Paradox games, every kingdom you choose to play as belongs to a culture and come with their own government system. If we take EU4 as an example, cultures are inherently tied with cultural traditions, which are inherent to a certain culture. In Imperator, this works pretty much the same, giving cultures modifiers that make them unique. The Romans, for example, has faster integration speed of vassal nations, and to portray Rome's military might, it can muster slightly more levy units than most, while at the same time, Rome is not a naval power first and foremost, and suffers a morale penalty on the high seas. Carthage is the opposite in this regard, paying less upkeep for their powerful merchant navy, but can muster fewer levy soldiers. On the other side of the Mediterranean and beyond, Egypt's powerful religious influence grants the followers of the state religion a large bonus to happiness, while in the Seleucid Empire, the vast cultural and ethnic differences within makes it hard to assimilate the population. But on the flip side, unintegrated culture groups gain a large happiness bonus as long as they remain so, meaning it can be wise to foster an open and inclusive society and not try to force assimilation. So far so good, and it works more or less like in previous Paradox games where culture is an important factor. But what makes it so much more complicated and granular is the fact that Imperator actually makes use of pops, individual units of people within your state, if you will. Pops are not only cultural units, but they're further divided into classes, religious affiliation, each class having various numbers depending on their wealth and citizenship status, and everything is further influenced by migration, because yes, Pops actually migrate in Imperator, and they tend to migrate to where there is food, jobs, and wealth. When it comes to how this relates to culture, pop culture is a vital factor in their happiness within your state, since different cultures will have different rights and privileges associated with them. However, a state's primary culture cannot be changed, so you either go on the assimilation path or perhaps try to create a society where your important cultures enjoy mostly, if not all, of the same rights. But then we have the government sector, and this is where Imperator does something arguably even more interesting, and this is a multi-layered one. Let's take the mighty state of Ptolemaic Egypt as an example. Egypt is an aristocratic monarchy, meaning it's based around its king and a powerful and wealthy nobility surrounding him. In other words, the state values power and authority, but even more so, the ability to keep the internal institutions and orders well maintained. This is reflected in the government's national ideas, and for Egypt's aristocratic monarchy, these inherent ideas give us 1 focus on military and 2 focus on oratory ideas, both of which are reflected in the ideas panel. You see, every government is founded on a set of ideas. In Imperator, although the number can vary, the most common number of available idea slots is 3. As you can tell, there is a whole number of ideas, each belonging to one of our 3 idea types. For Egypt, with our current government type, 1 military idea and 2 oratory ideas would match our government form, which would also activate powerful bonus modifiers for matching a government with its preferred ideas. However, every idea comes with a major strength to their particular field, and you're probably going to want to mix and match them as you go. This is why I love that it is in fact possible to make use of ideas outside of your own government type. It just comes with the penalty of not giving you that matching bonus. This ability is fantastic because it allows you to turn around and adapt to the situation you're in. Take Rome fighting Carthage as an example, and the time comes when you need to build a mighty navy. Well, depending on your technology levels in each idea type, you can now choose to focus your efforts on your navy by perhaps foregoing an army idea or something else entirely. Indeed, Rome's aristocratic republic allows for 2 military ideas paired with 1 oratory idea to fulfill its government match bonus. But since the bonus only relates to character loyalty and freeman happiness, you could theoretically make use of all 3 military ideas at once if you truly need that war focus going and give yourself an upper hand. And while Rome is quite military focused from the get-go, a democratic republic like Athens likes a mix of everything, while Etruria's oligarchic republic solely prefers a peaceful approach to governance. Be aware though that while there is no cooldown, enacting different ideas costs political influence, one of Imperator Rome's most vital currencies. But we're not done with the internal politics yet. Because that's right, Imperator has actual politics. Depending on your government form, your national assembly or ruling faction will take on different forms. Rome is a republic with a senate and 2 consuls, where the balance of power has to be managed to further your political agenda. Various political actors, which are actual people within your state by the way, with their own wealth and political power, must be carefully paid attention to, lest they coup the state or elect not to give you back their war-giving dictatorial powers. Elections are held every 5 years. Individual parties can be supported and taken advantage of, while the others will like you less for doing so, and the various factions are often supported by people from their corresponding interest groups. In the kingdom, it's a lot simpler, as long as you manage to keep your royal family's legitimacy high, and you can conduct various policies depending on your accumulated power influence, for example. Of course, any government has several offices where you can reward or tame your political allies or enemies, each office representing a different state mechanic, and then we have laws. And laws, much like national ideas, and much like Imperator's religious aspects, is all about changing realities, not necessarily a linear progression and accumulated bonuses. What I mean by this is that mostly everything in internal politics in Imperator is about making hard choices. Within a law section, you can only ever enact 1 law at a time. You can move back and forth between new and old laws, and each enactment will gain or lose you favor with each party, meaning you have to take the loyalty of your senators into account here. And just like with the national ideas, new reforms and laws are made available as time goes by, and as you unlock new technological advances, meaning every system in Imperator is neatly and smartly integrated into one another. And that technology tree is massive, by the way, harboring tech for each segment of society and relying on characters to influence the speed of research. I mean, do you see how deep this internal politics stuff goes? And how intricate this can become depending on the situation? In other words, whether you wish to build a tall and prosperous city-state with a population of 1 million people focusing on civic ideas, or a burgeoning empire built on blood through military ideas and laws reflecting it, you can. This is all held up on the outside by a diplomacy system that's intricate and with possibilities varying depending on your government type and the parties in power. For example, Rome can create a unique feudatory vassal from lesser states of the same culture group, say Italic factions in Italy, but they can also establish tributaries or regular client states, each with their own obligations and freedoms relating to their overlord. Each diplomatic action will have an impact at home though, and the Senate wants a say in anything, meaning you better have loyal party members and the power in the Senate or the appropriate laws to back it up, lest you incur tyranny penalties which will harm character loyalty and happiness, especially in the early game. Of course, in order to even talk to foreign nations, you need to be able to diplomatically reach them. Simulated by diplomatic reach, which means that in the early game, you're not going to be able to interact with foreign entities that are far away from your own borders. 2 factors influence diplomacy as well as internal politics further, and the first one is the power status of your state. Each state, depending on the number of territories under their control, leads towards increasing your power ranking from migratory tribe with no territories to a great power with over 500. And each new level allows for new options with inherent effects and diplomatic abilities. The second factor is Imperator's beautiful mission system, and you will recognize this from EU4 for example. But the difference is that Imperator's focuses much more on divergent choices, something EU4 kinda only began doing more or less recently. Again, as Rome for example, in the Conquest of Italia mission, we can decide whether to go for full-scale military conquest or improve diplomatic relations with Italic states, perhaps giving us new allies and vassals from the near get-go. New mission trees are made available after you complete each one, and perfectly complement the Imperator's sandbox gameplay style, and gives you interesting choices that let you simulate history as closely as you personally wish, as the missions truly are optional. And of course, we have Imperator Rome's in-depth trade and economy system, which is so fun that it makes EU4's trade looks like a kindergarten exercise, and of course outranks Crusader Kings' virtually non-existent one. In Imperator, every province produces a number of resources, which can either be kept within that province or either imported or exported from and to elsewhere. This is vital since each resource impacts various parts of your state, whether it comes to population growth, the ability to field heavy infantry or horses or elephants on the battlefield, or raise the happiness of a pop group, and much more. Every city has a trading cap depending on their size and laws, and all of this can be used to raise the general standard of living in your realm as far as possible, or indeed be used to extract wealth from a remotely conquered region into the beating heart of your empire. Trade can be complicated to fully learn, but with time it becomes more and more fun and allows you to create megacities unlike anywhere else. We also have an intricate religion system that is highly customizable, and you must pay attention to the major families, who will demand their share of influence in the empire. In short, Imperator Rome is so good that I can't believe it hasn't gotten more attention, since the game is so awesome after 2.0. Would I wish for an expanded timeline or even more mechanics? Of course, but for Paradox to even consider returning to the game, we need to pump those player numbers, baby! So if you're interested in Imperator or find what I've said exciting, then I'd highly recommend checking it out, either now or on the next sale, especially since you really only need the base game to have a great time. There are some fantastic mods here as well, like Terra Indomita, which literally adds all of Asia to the map, including China and Japan, an amazing Lord of the Rings mod, and so much more. Let me know your thoughts on Imperator Rome and this video in the comments, leave a like if you enjoyed what you saw, and if you loved it, subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!